Welcome back to the Momentum Sports Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Israel. Thank you for tuning in today, whenever that may be, from wherever that may be. We appreciate you joining the show. I have a special guest for you today with a deep, rich experience in U.S. soccer, over 25 years at the team level, at the league level, federation level. Court Jeske has seen it all. He's had some incredibly successful projects that he's been a part of, both at the league level and in particular at the team level. We'll get into what he did and was able to do in Nashville, getting that soccer club off the ground and up into the MLS and where they are today. We'll talk about what he's currently building in Oklahoma City, both the soccer team, the real estate, the stadium, and why that project is so special, and hopefully provide some insights and perspective that are ultimately valuable to you all, the listener. So with that, let's get right into it. Cool. Well, Court, thank you for joining the Momentum Sports Podcast. You've been somebody that we've been watching in really the core area of focus that we have, the middle market of sports, with the OKC project, with Echo and everything you all are doing. Kind of out of the gate here, why don't you give the audience kind of your role currently at Echo, at OKC Soccer, maybe a very high level of the project that you're currently focused on, and what Echo is as well. And then we'll start diving into some of your background and the unique perspective on this world of sports that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kyle, for having me on, and really appreciate you taking the time to hear my tiny story from the sports and entertainment world. Currently I sit as a partner at Echo Investment Capital, which is a group that was founded in the oil and gas business by Christian Kennedy about 10, 15 years ago. And then recently, as of 2 years ago, got into the sports and entertainment business through the acquisition of some land that set us up for a downtown stadium and multi-purpose stadium. And then also the acquisition of a USL men's team that would begin play in 2028. And so I met Christian. I was currently serving at the USL HQ League office, and I actually met him and some of his team from the private equity firm at a game in Louisville, where it was actually the first game ever on CBS, which was a very proud moment in my time at the USL that we were able to get that deal across the line. But met him and started talking about the vision for what they were going to do and what they felt like was possible in OKC. And the connecting link that I haven't mentioned is I'm originally from Oklahoma. So this was a chance to take 25 years of experience of sports and entertainment, primarily in soccer, primarily in the United States, and really kind of come full circle and bring those tools, bring those connections, bring that experience, and be able to collaborate on a project very close to home.
An amazing story, an amazing journey, one that I'm sure you probably couldn't have etched out as a plan. A lot of twists, a lot of turns and opportunities there. OKC is turning into what I believe one of the better projects, one of the most exciting projects in U.S. soccer generally. But let's rewind. You mentioned Oklahoma. I know you got into your career at the University of Oklahoma, although a short stint, but then worked your way ultimately into kind of three that I'd like to double click on, in particular with the MLS and the international business focus there. Kind of framing where U.S. soccer is today and with what you saw at the MLS level. What are some of the things that are most salient as far as the progression of the sport here domestically, and not just from a fan base perspective, but from a development, infrastructure, a investment, private equity perspective? Where was U.S. soccer then when you started the MLS, and in regards to where it's gone today?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I love this question, Kyle, that I get often because for the listeners, I had the chance to start my professional sports career as a volunteer intern for the University of Oklahoma Athletic Development Office. So incredibly powerful work. I was doing stuffing envelopes in 2000, 2001 to mail out to donors to ask them for money. But it got me in the door, right? And then I used a bunch of different connections and experiences to kind of move throughout and navigate throughout. But I actually took my first job in soccer working for the Kansas City Wizards, selling tickets in 2001 and 2002. And so that was quite an interesting project where, we were selling tickets to Arrowhead Stadium, an NFL stadium that holds 82,000 people. And I'll just say that we were announcing crowds of 3,000 and 4,000 announcing. So you can imagine the stability and the challenges with that. And Major League Soccer had just actually contracted 2 teams in the state of Florida. So they'd gone from a league of 12 to a league of 10. And frankly, as a young, probably 22, 23-year-old selling tickets, I was curious if I would have a job before the season was over because of the fragility of the league. And then I spent, some time abroad working with FIFA. I spent time at the U.S. Soccer Federation. And then, as you pointed out, I was almost a decade at Major League Soccer, and then time at Nashville SC and U.S. Soccer. USL, and now Oklahoma City. So there's been 25 years in my North American soccer business perspective. And the way I describe it, Kyle, if we have seen whatever revolution of growth in that period, probably a couple revolutions of growth, I think we'll see that same amount in the next 5 years. I think 2026 through 2031, it's almost like a train that's starting, and at first, the wheels are turning ever so slow, and then each revolution comes faster. I think the infrastructure that's in play today, I think the major events of Men's World Cup, Olympics, Women's World Cup, probably a Copa America, maybe another Club World Cup, all those things happening are just going to accelerate the growth that we've already seen. And it won't be as the question used to be, will soccer survive? And I think the question now is, how big can soccer be in this country?
Incredible 25-year perspective. No other way to get that perspective other than elbow grease and a lot of hard work, which is why you, in my mind, identify as one of the unique operators, team owners in U.S. sports. Generally, I'm curious, what do you think it expedites? So in that 5-year time frame, is that at a youth level? Is that in pulling attention from different capital sources that are now seeing the multitudes of ways to get involved with sports? We'll get into the stadium and mixed-use real estate development there in Oklahoma City. Like, what's going to be expedited in those 5 years?
Yeah, I think one, let's put the investment piece aside, and that's a very important one because things that are investable become desirable, and things that are desirable become investable. So we'll put that Oklahoma City, maybe even Nashville experience off to the side, what we're seeing in the marketplace. If you speak about it just from a sports and entertainment, even a soccer lens, I think what you've got is these major shared moments that are coming. And now it's so important because of the fractured media landscape, because of social media, et cetera. It's so important that you have these shared moments. And I think what we've got is 4 or 5, maybe even 6 major moments that are coming. And different than maybe in the past, we've got a professional infrastructure behind it that will be doing its darndest to plant the seed, nourish it and grow it, and then, harvest it afterwards. And so you actually, if you think about, everyone references the 94 World Cup, but what they also forget is we hosted a Women's World Cup in 99 and another Women's World Cup in 2003 because of the SARS issue, the SARS pandemic in China. I was actually at the U.S. Soccer Federation when, in about 9 months' time, FIFA asked us to host that. So
wow,
there was also an Olympics in '96, right? So there was a similar catalyst of events over about an 8-9 year period versus 5, but you didn't have the professional backdrop of 100 teams, of a robust women's league, another starting women's league, even a fourth division of semi-pro across all the acronyms, there to capture, nourish, and ultimately build fans and reoccurring fans out of these events.
I appreciate that. I absolutely agree. We point to some of those same kind of macro and the micro within the macro trends that you just laid out there. Really well said. Before we get to, I'd like to double click on your time at Nashville, if we can. You're obviously, establishing something from what I can tell from the very beginning. What are you taking? What's most salient as things that you needed or thought about applying from that experience to, the role that you're in today and building or maybe just a rebirth of a soccer franchise in Oklahoma City? You think about a stadium development there at the beginning, but what are some of those key things that were learnings there that you can now apply that you may not have had going into Nashville?
Yeah, it's great. I always smile because it brings back such great memories, and a lot of similarities as well. So the background is, in 2016, we had just finished Copa America Centenario. And as head of international business at MLS at the time, that was an event that fell right under my purview. And it was a heavy lift because we had less than a year to pull it off. But that event went very, very well. And I was approached by a couple investors in Nashville that, through a connection of Alec Papadakis, that said, we'd like to start a professional team in Nashville. And so I had been traveling the country, not just in MLS markets, but other markets, to see how soccer would do for a company called SUM, which is Soccer United Marketing, the commercial arm of MLS. And ironically, I'd been invited, Kyle, to the NHL All-Star game in 2016, which was in Nashville. And so their head of international events had invited the head of international business at SUM to take it in. And I remember being in the city and thinking, wow, number one, there's something going on here. And two, this would be the perfect American city for a new professional team. And so, some back and forth and things fell into place. And the next thing you know, it was October of 16, 3 or 4 months after Copa had ended. And along with the founders, David Dill, Chris Redditch, and Marcus Whitney, I was joining the ownership group as the first CEO. Our challenges were, people would say soccer isn't going to work in the South. You definitely can't call it FC because football means something very different here. We've never seen it work. We don't have a stadium for it. We're just not sure that we have room for a team beyond the Titans and Predators. All the kind of same excuses that I've seen. And we really stuck to our plan, which is a plan that the ownership group and I crafted, which was, we're going to focus on Nashville. And a very simple message that pro soccer is coming to Nashville. And it didn't matter if it was USL, MLS, NWSL, NASL, you pick your acronym. If we've done one thing really well in soccer in this country in 25 years, it's been to confuse the public with acronyms. We are amazing at that as soccer executives in this country. So I'll give James Cannon, our CMO, a lot of credit. We had this very simple campaign that pro soccer comes to Nashville. And it was images of, players and Nashville SC, Nissan across the jersey. And when we had our first ever exhibition game was against Atlanta United, sold out. And then we had our first ever regular season game against the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, and we had such demand, we had to move that to Nissan Stadium where the Titans play. And as I walked around on that rainy day and we had 20,000 people there, then people realized, okay, soccer can work in the South. And that it wasn't really about the league we were in, it was about community. And in that process, John Ingram and his group had come along and said, we also believe pro soccer belongs in Nashville. And they had expansive capital to add to what we had started and push for Major League Soccer. And so it was a great collaboration and everyone played their part. But now you look 10 years later and where there was nothing, literally nothing, no employee, no stadium, no brand, to 10 years later, and they have the largest soccer specific stadium in the country. They've got a fantastic brand. They've got on-field success that continues with Mike Jacobs and the technical team that we brought on. And they're really a beacon of soccer in the South. So it can happen very quickly. And what I saw in Oklahoma City and what Christian and the group wanted to do was the same set of ingredients. And then, oh, by the way, it got to be back home where I have a lot of connections and folks in the industry that could help us out.
What type of joy does building something from literally nothing give to somebody like yourself? I mean, I know you're extremely professional. You've seen a lot. You've done a lot. Present extremely well. You're an executive, but like just to court, like what does that mean?
Look, I'll use a very simple word. It's fun.
Yeah,
it's really, really fun to be able to do stuff and have people come up and say, I didn't ever think this would happen in our city, or, my young kid wakes up Saturday morning and puts a jersey on when he used to wear a Barcelona one. Now he puts on Nashville SC, soon Oklahoma City. That I think is the power behind this. Is it's a community asset. It's not owned by any one individual. It's owned by the community, and when done right, that enrollment of them is what creates the value. That's what creates the fandom that ultimately makes it an investable and attractive product for people. And that cycle continues if done right.
Do you think that, like, what was the fan? I'm just curious now that we got on the Nashville topic, like how many of your fans do you think were SEC football, Titan fans, kind of, opening their mind to soccer? And how many were like soccer fans that happen to live in the region that came out specifically for that and may not attend a football game throughout the course of the year?
Yeah, I think we get some very specific data on this because we surveyed people in year one. And one of the proud achievements I have from that inaugural year with the team was we had 6,200 season ticket holders in our inaugural season ticket members, which may not sound like a lot if you're listening out there and you think, Bayern Munich has 60,000 and,
I'm a member at Hertha. There's a ridiculous amount of
exactly.
Members.
But those clubs are 125 years ahead. Yeah. And so we could only perform and measure ourselves against FC Cincinnati or the Sacramento Republic or the Montreal Impact or the Portland Timbers, who had all been USL clubs as well. And so to get to 6,200 season ticket members in a stadium the inaugural year that held 7,500 meant that we had the atmosphere, the environment, everything that propelled it forward. But to answer your question, it was almost equal thirds when we looked at it. Of those members, a third, maybe a little more, maybe 40% were avid soccer fans that either supported Nashville SC from day one or began by saying, actually, I prefer Arsenal, which is my team, but I'll root for this team because, and then they realized, hey, this is actually pretty good, and it's all those things. Then the middle group were sports fans that, I like the Nashville Titans and Predators, and I've never tried soccer, but why not? And it's something to do. And then the last bucket were people that just wanted to root for the city. And a lot of those tickets we sold to the opening game at Nissan Stadium, we billed it as Nashville versus Pittsburgh. And we didn't talk about a league or name or anything, but guess what also happened in 2016, 2017? The Predators faced the Pittsburgh Penguins in the NHL finals, right? The Titans played the Steelers in the NFL. So we just wanted to raise to Pittsburgh's aspirational level as Nashville. And so we got these people out They weren't even sports fans, but they were fans of Nashville, and it was an event. So I think you got to have, and we do this in Oklahoma City, we've got diverse strategies and communications. Greg Lawless and Michael Milberger at Short Corner do a phenomenal job messaging to all three of those groups to say now is the time. This isn't just a soccer story. It's not just a sports story. It's really a story about the future of Oklahoma City.
I think that's a fantastic perspective. Thank you for giving deep color there. I think it's important, for a lot of our owners or a lot of our listeners or team owners or those investing in the space. I think that's an important perspective to have and to understand. Maybe we zoom out a little bit from, kind of understanding the audience and growing an audience to more of a league level and talk about your time at the USL, your initiatives there. I know you whatever the mechanism was to leave Nashville and join the USL office. What kind of recap? What was your role there and your focus there? How were you thinking about the brand and the future of it? For context, for the audience, that was 19 to 22 in the EVP role, and then 22 to 24 as the chief commercial officer, which in a league like the USL at a growth stage that it's at was an important role. So why don't you summarize or give us some perspective there of that time?
Yeah, Kyle, happy to. And as you were asking the question, I immediately, would probably be remiss if I didn't thank the people that gave me those opportunities. So Don Garber, Kathy Carter at MLS that really gave me a chance to drive one area of business. And while I was driving that international area of business, I got to learn from consumer products, from media, from sponsorship sales, from partnerships, etc. And then after we had finished the Nashville transaction and the new ownership group had fully taken control, Alec Papadakis, Jake Edwards, Justin Papadakis for saying, hey, Court, you got to be a part of a great deal of growth at MLS. Do you think you could help us replicate some of that commercial success for the collective of USL owners that we have these days? And that was back in end of 2018, early 2019. And so I immediately thought, what better way to try to help a lot of the other groups in the boardroom than to help at the league level?
Yeah.
And so I'll always thank all those unique individuals for the chances that they gave me, and so many more out there, because I wouldn't have had the chance to work with and cooperate with all those different ownership groups in the enterprise if they hadn't given me the opportunity. So I'm so thankful. But
sure.
We came in, and needless to say, USL had a lot of other things that it was dealing with in 2018 and 2019 than to focus on a commercial strategy. And so, and that was mainly growth and sustaining the existence of it. I think it's easy to sit here today and look and say, wow, look how strong and opportunistic this investment in this profile is. But credit to the leaders the early year, it was fragile. It was very, very fragile. And it took a lot of moments of strength and steadfast strategy to get through some of those early years when clubs were really, really investing and you had teams going out of business with regularity. But Alec and Rob and Justin and Jake all had a vision, and luckily they gave me the keys to the commercial side. And so the first thing we did is we stepped in and we went through a process whereby we assessed every club. We worked with them to build 4 and 5 year business plans so that we could chart progress. And that's kind of how we focused on the club growth side of it and the sustainability of it. And then on the media sponsorship and, let's call it ticketing side, we immediately knew, and I'd learned this from Gary Stevenson and the guys at MLS, we have to enhance our media profile. So at the time, ESPN was not paying us very much money, and they weren't showing us very much. In fact, we had most games on ESPN3 with a handful of matches a year on ESPN2. And then fast forward through a couple ESPN media cycles, the addition of CBS, And the year I left, we had 60 matches that were nationally televised, and including 4 or 5 on big CBS, 10 or
Yep.
12 on ESPN1 or ESPN2, and then every single game broadcast on ESPN Plus or a CBS platform, and simulcast locally in many cases as well. So you can't grow value without increasing the eyeballs that are on the product. And so at USL, the first steps were grow the exposure, and then we can think about growing the commercial partnerships and the sponsorship, because sponsors are sophisticated these days, and they're going to want to look at and say, this is valued at X because of the number of live viewers, the number of digital viewers, and the number of fans on social media, and calculated impressions. So first we went scale, then we went commercialization with the addition of premier partnerships, and then legends selling for us, and trying to really stabilize and grow, let's call it the annual financial basis for the clubs that were out there.
Got it. Very helpful context. Gosh, I feel like I could go in so many directions. How could somebody think about, having spent time with Justin now and Dan and Jordan and the group in the front office, obviously infrastructure, whether that be stadium development in the right markets, mixed use real estate development, like how is that paired, right? So for us today, we're not underwriting a huge or really any media element in a meaningful way to any of our underwriting processes. I don't think we should. And I think when you have the right infrastructure, you can pull out levers in other directions. But for the audience that may just be getting into soccer, that are thinking about, various leagues and understanding them, how would you frame today's USL vision when you think through the lens of real estate and stadium development? And why is that such a core emphasis?
Yeah, I think, look, this is the thesis we have in Oklahoma City as well, is these are community assets. And if you think about cities around the world, almost every one of them has a soccer team. The level they play in, the league they play in, it doesn't matter, but they're all part of the global game. And if you take that into our markets across the USL, big and small, it could be a Phoenix, Indianapolis, Tampa, Oklahoma City, down to smaller ones like Charleston, New Mexico, or you name it. I was going to say San Antonio, but that's a pretty big market too. There's a lot of them to consider.
There are a lot. There are a lot today.
I feel the opportunity is best when it's the sole source of professional soccer in the market. And that could be men and or women. And that could be professional men and semi-pro women, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter, but you have to be the core of the conversation. And so when you've got that and you actually have that physical stadium location locked down, either built or to be built, then you have a brick and mortar behind your investment that, if done right, you're not selling a particular league. Again, to go back to our thesis, you're selling soccer in America. And there's no doubt that the international perception and understanding is that trajectory is nothing but up and to the right. And you're buying into the American economy and the trust that our cities of 1.5, 2 million can support professional soccer, which undoubtedly I can say from 2 case studies, Nashville and Oklahoma City, they can. So I think where the real estate piece comes in, and it comes in more for some than others, is do you have that adjacent opportunity? And sometimes it might not even be adjacent, it may be in market. But you've got a chance to do something that diversifies your investment, makes it a 50 or 75 or 100-year time horizon versus just a 3 to 5 to 7 one, which oftentimes people think about sports in that lens.
Sure.
And that's why it's such a good value. You're buying into the future of American soccer. And to tie that in with my first comment, it is going to grow beyond our expectations over the next 5 years.
You just mentioned the future of American soccer, right? And framing, your project or the thesis generally on investing in the future of soccer. The USL has made announcements, over the last year, the proposed installation of promotion and relegation, the USL Premier sanctioned with, US Soccer Division One. How do you process that in your seat? Obviously, the MLS is a closed system. There's a lot of benefits to that from a valuation perspective. MLS clubs having some of the largest soccer values globally because of that closed system. But from a marketing perspective, from an excitement, from a small market, from a storytelling, there's a lot to love about promotion and relegation while you balance the risk reward of what happens if we're relegated or, can we start somewhere and get promoted? So just curious how that lands with you, how you're processing and thinking about it and what it may do for the game.
Yeah, listen, I a couple things. One, we focus on the acronym that matters, and that's OKC.
Got it.
And in my lens, we don't talk about USL Championship, USL Premier, USL League One, USL Super League. We talk about OKC and bringing the narrative back to supporting pro soccer is here.
Got it.
Because you have to be good somewhere before you try to be good everywhere. And so those principles have worked as we sit just shy of 3,000 season ticket deposits as we speak today. That's with 2 years to go and without the name being publicly announced yet. So I feel really good to use the same numbers we had in Nashville at getting to a 70 to 80% stadium on a sold out season ticket membership basis. That being said, there, of course, you have to address the public narrative and you have to think about the league that you're playing in. And MLS has a ton going for it. It is Soccer in America. They have a 30-year start on this. They've got the biggest cities and some of the biggest owners. But I don't feel like what we have to do is anything to do with MLS. I feel like USL should focus on creating something that is different and creating its own brand identity. I've used this example for years, but think about the way that football, not soccer, but football is thought about in America. And so if I ask someone in Oklahoma City who their favorite football team is, they could answer the Dallas Cowboys or the Oklahoma Sooners. There's no doubt that the Dallas Cowboys are a bigger enterprise and get paid more in bigger city and all this, but it doesn't change the passion of me or the rest of Sooner Nation out there. So when I explained that to a lot of USL owners and that dynamic, I think it worked for them because they live in these markets that are college-centric markets. And so why don't we focus on being just a different brand of football that will not compete or compete with MLS? To me, that's not really what you wake up and think about, but it's capitalizing on the opportunity in your market. Because at the end of the day, soccer is city-based and community-based. And that's why clubs are clubs. And if they do that, it'll carve out its own proper niche in the rapidly growing market. And that can be extremely valuable, just as MLS's enterprise and NWSL's enterprise can be extremely valuable.
Court, I think that the OKC project, your project, team name yet to be named, the focus on soccer coming to the city is one of the more ambitious, exciting, notable projects domestically and soccer generally and globally. You've brought in some fantastic partners, but outside of being from Oklahoma, why was now the right time specifically in Oklahoma City for soccer to come back essentially?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I had been, as we talked about, for 6 years, I was at the league office. And so I had a touch point of various levels at every single market that we had across the country. And the principal owner at the time in Oklahoma City, a gentleman by the name of Bob Funk Jr., had done a very good job with the team, but unfortunately, due to a stadium that was foreclosed on, or not foreclosed on, but was deemed unsafe for the public because it was a 100-year-old WPA project and the pandemic, they had to go on hiatus. And so I had actually been working with Bob and his other owners to try to find a new investor for them as a part of what I had my league hat on for, and had special interest because of growing up in the state and attending the University of Oklahoma, et cetera. So over time, we brought a few people to market. They didn't work out. Bob did a very good job of aligning the land downtown with a multi-purpose stadium and secured an allocation of $41 million of public funding to begin that process. And that was back even in 2019. We all know now in 2026, $41 million won't build you very much, unfortunately. But through three other mechanisms, including a bond funding process that I went through with the city last year, we're now at $121 million of public funding for the project. So I knew that Oklahoma City had extreme civic alignment. I know that, credit to Bob and the previous ownership group, Tim McLaughlin and others, they had set up the right location for the stadium to happen. And the new ownership group with Echo that I mentioned was going to have the ability and the capital to do the right thing and invest properly. One key thing that often gets overlooked is, do ownership groups have the ability to invest? Because many times in the early years of projects, it's a substantial investment. And so what you don't want to do is not have enough capital, and you kind of have to dinosaur arm your way through the process, and you essentially save your way to prosperity, which never works. So all those things were aligned. And then when sitting down with Christian and the folks at Echo, it was clear to me that the puzzle pieces fit: stadium, land, capital, and the fact that the things they lacked were a vision on how to build a professional soccer club that's far bigger than the sum of its parts, and how to make sure that it is investable and doesn't lose money. Those are key things when you're trying to build an investor profile. And so those puzzle pieces really came together. Christian worked on the investor and adding people like Russell Westbrook and Nick Gross and the Chickasaw Nation that really validated what we were doing. And then I worked on the committee, the city, the fans, to make sure that the investment and the opportunity were coming together. So it's been a phenomenal almost 2 years now, and really feel like we are on a trajectory that no other club, USL or NWSL, I can speak to, is on at this point in professional soccer in North America.
Obviously, the public-private partnership that you all have and have established is critical. You know, we're in opportunities looking for land under control, line of sight on entitlement, zoning, permitting, those types of things that, you know, can, if you know what you're doing, aren't overlooked. But, you know, the general population doesn't think about those as a core part of the process of establishing a sports team in this context. And obviously fantastic to have, you know, that established. Two-part question here. Can you give the audience who may not be completely familiar how that land that was acquired, you mentioned that it was really strategic, a great location. Like, what is it a part of? What's around it? Where is it that makes it that? And then how are you thinking about the type of stadium that you want to put on that land today?
Yeah, great. So again, going back to the land that was secured, the option was secured by the previous ownership group. And what it is 9 acres downtown that sits just south of the entertainment district called Bricktown, and then just east of the Omni and Convention Center that was just built by the city of Oklahoma City. And oh, by the way, less than a quarter of a mile away, the NBA team, the NBA Thunder, is building their own new building. And so what we have is not only the 9 acres in the middle of 50 that has been donated to the city of Oklahoma City, but our development partner, Robinson Park, who's one of the most established local developers there is, and Mark Beffert are really guiding the 50-acre mixed-use development. And for this one, my vision came a lot from a couple of visits to the Battery in Atlanta. And when you see how the Braves and Liberty Media approach that space, not from an 81 days a year baseball schedule, but from a 365-degree schedule. So the stadium we are building inside the 50-acre development, which will take 10 to 15 years to fully develop, will be extremely multi-purpose. It will be a home for women's and men's soccer, yes. It will be a home for high school football. It will be a home for concerts, graduations, you name it, because that throughput adds value to the district and the value to the commercial and residential initiatives around it. So we really think about being a community center with a field in the middle. And then what we've got the option to do in that surrounding area is working with Populous, who's also designing the stadium, thinking about, I think it's a 4, maybe even 5-phase approach now of what it'll look like in 26, all the way up to what it'll look like in 2040, probably when it's all completely finished. Maybe 2035. There's a lot of factors, but 50 acres is a lot of land to develop.
It is.
So we've actually structured our group that, there's a soccer team and there's the stadium, but then there's also, for some investors, there's the chance to join the real estate piece of it as well as it evolves.
Amazing. And that alignment between team ownership, stadium ownership, or management, or both, in real estate is a flywheel that can be unbelievably synergistic and have significant unlocking. We point to the Battery as well. I am curious, could you double click a little bit there? I think we got about 10 or 15 minutes left on, the experience you had in putting on events, global events, how you think about, utilizing the stadium as that kind of annual asset outside of the days that there are clubs playing. You alluded to high school sports, et cetera, but maybe for the audience that's unfamiliar, like how does that revenue generation machine work in parallel with the club? How can it support that if structured the right way? I'm not sure people in the past, that are outside the space have thought about that stadium being this ideally 365, but this revenue generating asset, and how some clubs don't have access to F&B or parking or, stadium naming rights, et cetera.
I think it's a great question, and something that we've actually evolved our thinking in the year and a half, 2 years that I've been on this, from the idea that yes, we want soccer for sure. And yes, there's a few key other things that we want to have. But really, as we started making the rounds in North America to similar sized venues, which is the 10 to 20,000 seat venue, what every ownership group we met with said is, I wish I had built this to have more utilization. If you think about it, let's put what are called dark day events to the side. So this would be a local business renting a suite for a conference, or a birthday party or bar mitzvah at the club level. Those things can happen often, and they have a element of rental and or food and beverage through our partner Levy, et cetera, piece of it. But really what I think is underutilized in this country often is the in-bowl, in-stadium, on the field events. So even if you had pro women's and men's soccer, you're looking at 34 out of 365 days. You're looking at less than 2% utilization. Less than 10% utilization on that. So what we've tried to do with Populous, and they've been phenomenal, is think about how do we increase a Thursday night high school football usage or Tuesday night local high school soccer rivalry usage. And some people might say, gosh, that's too much. And it's like, no, because yes, that soccer game of the two biggest high schools on a Tuesday night in the spring, Kyle, that may only get you 500 or 750 people between family, friends, coaches, players, everyone. It's not going to fill up the 10,000, but it's 750 more people than you would have if you had
Yep.
zero. And
Yep.
so we look at every date. Not all dates are the same, but we look at every date as an opportunity. And whether it's a graduation, whether it's a smaller concert, we are designing the stadium for different size crowds, from access points that are scalable down to one access point with a grab and go concession that services 1,000 seats to, with 8,000 people on the field, almost a 20,000 seat concert venue that is the largest in the state. So we're thinking large and small. Utilization matters. What does that do? It brings people through the building. You get their data that they'll share with you because they want to come back for other events. It drives concessions. It drives the value of all your partnerships. And probably most importantly, that gets lost, we're providing Oklahoma City the best return on their civic investment.
Yep.
That makes it worth the $121 million that Mayor Holt and others have decided to invest in us.
Really well said, really well framed. I can very much appreciate that. I'm curious, is there any one or two things from like a stadium technology integration? You mentioned grab and go, but there's a lot of projects that are going to come out of the ground, different shapes and sizes, different structures, prefabricated cement, et cetera. But are there some things that are happening in stadium development discussions where it's like, hey, we got to be thinking about this technology that's going to be relevant in 2035 that may not be in 2028 when we open this thing? Like anything salient or top of mind that's interesting?
Yeah. My mind goes to a couple of things. And what I've learned over the last year and a half is whatever you build, inevitably you're going to want to update it and change it in year 2, year 5, year 10. You can only future proof it so much.
Sure.
That being said, the trends that I've seen and learned from with Levy or with the legends who did our study for us is that mobile phones are not only not going away, they are going to be the core of everything. So your ticket, your in-seat ordering experience for nachos, your post-game survey, your vote during the game for the player of the game. The mobile phone is the single, the way you pay as you walk out is going to be the singular focal point of everything that we bring into the stadium. And how you may use that to improve the user experience. Trust me, we don't want everyone on their phone when they're in there. We want them active and engaged in the community event, in the sport, in the concert. But there's no question we all do far more with our phone than we ever thought today. That's only going to continue. If I'd asked you 10 years ago, you'll never walk into a bank again, people would say you're crazy. But now we all do it.
I'm trying to remember the last time I went to bank.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, there's some things like that we are trusting and relying on our partners in the market. I mentioned Levy and Legends to name a few, to know that area of business and to drive us forward. Because I can't know everything, and our ownership group can't know everything. There's some very technologically focused things like that, and then there's some just operator things that I've learned throughout the years. Like we're going to have 2 loading ramps. Most venues just have 1, but when you need speed of turnover, the number one inhibitor of speed is the time it takes trucks to go on and off the field with chairs, with dirt, with barrel racing, barrels, whatever it is. So why not double that, and so we're going to do some other things like that there's nowhere in writing that it's a good idea, but we kind of think it is as we think through it.
I mean, one of the questions in that regard is always like, natural turf or synthetic turf. Are you guys thinking through that and pondering that as well?
We are, and we've already made a commitment that if we do synthetic turf, it will be the best synthetic turf in the world, and it will play better than natural grass. And so we've done our research. There's synthetic turf that UEFA Champions League sanctions for Cristiano Ronaldo to play on, and he has. Messi plays on turf across MLS these days. I get it. There is a stigma that natural grass is by far and away the better surface for soccer. But I would argue that it's the better surface if it is at a venue where it's only used 17 times a year.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make us good public stewards of our venue. So if we go the route of synthetic turf, the only way we'll do it is if we can guarantee the visual aspect for fans and the playability for soccer is paramount. And I should say soccer and football for that matter, whether it's high school, UFL, you name it. You want people to feel like the building is made for them.
I mean, these are the things that you're forced to think about, being in your seat. Some people don't process that, but, 2 ramps to load, synthetic turf that allows you to be agile and support the multiple events per year are critical. I'll get you out of here with 2 more questions. Just quickly, what are your thoughts about the signal that it sends to the USL? We have an asset in the league. We want all, ships to rise with the tide that the USL brought in. Private equity capital, Bell Tower, has made a significant investment. What's the general signal overall to people thinking about investing in the space? Where the league's going to go. You had the unique perspective that you had. What's that meant just generally?
Yeah, look, I think all very positive things. And again, I'll use my analogy that the revolutions of the boulder were a little slow in the early years, but man, is the professional soccer business humming in North America. And the question is no longer, is it going to survive, but how big can it be? And I think, the Bell Tower Group, their equity investment, I think the commitment CBS made as a broadcaster, are all positive signs for USL and the future of soccer. And at the end of the day, again, I believe what people are buying is American soccer. And they're buying it in the top 60, 75 MSAs, which in many countries, their first division cities are much smaller than our second division ones. So I don't want division sanctioning, which I actually see as a filing cabinet exercise.
Sure.
To limit our potential regardless of what league you play in. So again, we're going to focus on OKC and making it a very worthwhile investment for our city, for our region, and for the people involved.
Likewise, I'll get you out of here on this, and then I'd love to hear where people can connect with you. I'm not sure if your fundraising round is closed, but professional sports franchises doing big things often are looking for the right partners no matter what. So we'll figure out where they can reach out. But I'm curious about the women's game real quick. Obviously, the NWSL has continued to explode from a valuation perspective. The USL's leaning into their own version of a women's league. We have a portfolio asset in Sporting Jacks right now playing in the Gamebridge Super League. Still a ton of work to do naturally for an emerging league. But the NWSL has showed a lot of promise about just the general attention of the sport. Just what's your thoughts on women's soccer? Is that something that could be in the plans in the future in Oklahoma City? What's your take there?
Yeah, we've committed from day one that we will have women's soccer as a part of what we do. We actually have one of our core tenets is that we're going to be a club with gender equity and cultural equity in mind from day one. And the gender equity, we say a club built for women and men. Generally, people say men and women, but
men and women
train ourselves, and I train everyone with the club to say it that way because we're intentional about it. So I can't yet answer, is this going to be, what acronym is going to go with it? I think also the W League and the league that Sean Jones and those guys, they've all done phenomenal things in the women's space.
Yep.
What's important for us is that we provide an opportunity at the highest level that's right for us and possible for us for women to be a part of the club that we're building. That's really enhanced our conversation and value proposition with the city, with council, and quite frankly, with clubs. Because this community asset should be one built with women and men from mind from day one. So we're even doing things like the locker rooms. We have 4 of them, home and away, home and away. They're all equal sized, women and men. We don't know what team's going to go in there, but we know that this is the way you need to build for the next 50 years.
Love it.
And I'm bullish on all. I'm bullish on all women's sports, and there's going to be some calibration and some bumps because a lot of it's in its infancy of growth, but it's going to be just fine. And people will look back and say, "I wish I had."
I agree. Cool. Well, listen, really, really appreciate you gave us an hour here today. I know the audience is going to enjoy the perspective, the background. If somebody wants to reach out about the OKC projects, the best way to do that through the website or Echo's website. What's easiest?
Yeah, look, people, the easy thing, Court Jeske on LinkedIn is a very easy one that you don't have to remember anything else. It's a conduit for so much of the business that we do. I'm a little slow on checking it. They can also go to the OKC for Soccer webpage, okcforsoccer.com. That's a placeholder until we announce the club name. That'll link you to Echo and what we're doing through the larger business at Echo. It'll link you to the story about what we're doing with fans, the stadium, you name it. That's another option. And they can also email me at cjeske@echo.global. Any of those 3 are completely fine ways to learn more and follow the movement. And I would say, even if you're not investing, but you want to follow the journey of a club being built to reach its maximum potential for a community and for an investor, follow along. I think we've got a good pathway. I think we had one in Nashville, and we're exceeding the early expectations that we have so far.
Awesome. Well, we're fans. We're pulling for you guys' success. We'll be paying close attention. Appreciate the time again today, and we'll be in touch here in the near future.
Kyle, thank you. Thank you to the listeners for taking the time to learn about OKC.
Thank you, Court, for joining us. Really appreciate you being here. Excited about what the future looks like for soccer, both the women's and men's side there in Oklahoma City. For everyone listening out there today, appreciate you joining us for this hour-long episode. If you're interested in the future of soccer, infrastructure, and generally sports as an asset class, be sure to subscribe to the Momentum Sports podcast right below. You can do that on YouTube by smashing that subscribe button. You can do that on Spotify as well. We'd appreciate the support. If you're interested in seeing our bi-weekly newsletter, it comes out every Wednesday and every Saturday. You can find a link to subscribe to that newsletter below in the comments section. You can also go to our website and we'll direct you there as well. Until next time, I appreciate you joining us. Thanks for tuning in. Let's go.